Jim, in trying to really get to the root of what religion is, and is there a truth in them, not just a social truth, but a so-called ontological, a real being truth, metaphysical about religion. One of the fascinating things that I've realized for much of my life that you've studied is that most religions have an eschatological, an end time wish or fear or dealing with it. What is it about religion that has this end time energy that's embedded within it?
I think it's coming, that end time emphasis is really coming mainly right out of the Bible. As the Bible talks about God and the universe and humankind and history, it begins to focus, particularly in the Hebrew prophets of the Old Testament, on this ideal time of the future, this eschatology, as you say. But it does more than that. You get the sense as time goes on, particularly into the time of Jesus, when you have Christianity forming, that the movements that arise, and it isn't just Jesus, we've got the Dead Sea Scrolls and we've got other movements, are saying not only is the end time coming, but we will likely live to see it. Now, Christianity goes on. I often tell my students apocalypticism, this idea that the end time is in our day, is a very interesting idea, but I want to remind you, I tell them, it has a 100% failure rate so far. So you're buying into an idea that's fascinating and even exciting if you could imagine it, but so far it's always been wrong. Now, how could Jesus be wrong? Christians have all sorts of circumlocutions, but we've got very clear texts.
So in the New Testament, the apostles
everywhere
really believed that their time was the end time.
They thought they would see it. When Paul talks about Jesus returning, he says, we who are alive will see the Lord. He tells people not to get married. He tells slaves not to even try to be free because very soon it'll all be over. I think for that first generation or two, the Christians are thoroughly apocalyptic. And other Jews from that period share this. It's hard to sustain that kind of fervor as another generation comes and another, because the predictions that were made don't come true and people have to adjust. And I think the Dead Sea Scrolls have helped us a great deal because they're about 200 to 100 years before Jesus. So it's like a trial run on the end and it doesn't work, and then Jesus comes along, get another trial run on the end. So you'd think it would long ago be over and people would just forget it. Muslims, though, have their apocalyptic schemes today, as we know. You know, the so-called Muslim terrorists are not just politically driven. If you study their ideology, they think they're living in the end time. They have their prophecies and predictions that they think they will live to see, which gives them a great deal of fervor. I think what happens, I've studied apocalypticism a lot, the dynamics of it, I call it. It has to do with the fit between predictions, primarily in prophecies, the Old and New Testament for Christians and Jews, a fit between those prophecies and a real lived situation in the world. And the reason we, in the 20th and 21st century, have lived through this sort of apocalyptic heyday. Do you remember the book, The Late Great Planet Earth, in the 70s, Hal Lindsey? I think that sold more than any book of the decade of the 70s. And here's this, you know, by most measures, crazy apocalyptic predictions that the end is very near.
With a lot of specifics of which nation's going to do what and when and number of years and wars.
I think what fueled that book and the kind of apocalyptic fervor that we find among the fundamentalist Christians, it's very strong. Just flip your TV channels, you still hear it today in the 21st century, is the establishment of the State of Israel, the Six-Day War where Jews occupied Jerusalem or regained it, depending on your point of view, for the first time in 2,000 years. so that you can now open the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel, which are two of the main prophetic books, and you can read events in a very literal way that you haven't been able to do for 2,000 years. So whenever you get this fit between a set of predicted elements that can be plugged into what's going on, you get this fervor. It took place in the Middle Ages. You know, we can trace kind of the history of apocalypticism and how it ebbs and wanes through history. But we clearly are living in such a time. But there's one more factor, and that is things like global warming and the environmental crisis and just what we're told about the cosmology, the possibility of asteroids hitting. Some of that sounds very modern and scientific until you open the prophetic books, and they do talk about, in some imagined way, events that could be correlated with those kind of expectations.
So this type of current day science, you're saying, helps fuel or at least reinforces this longing that religions have that have this fit between some events today, some texts in Daniel and Revelation, and then some scientific ideas that may fuel that.
Yeah, the book of Revelation talks about the earth becoming 7 times warmer. It talks about an asteroid falling from heaven and poisoning 1/3 of the waters, you see. And so people read that sort of thing, and they've got the political history of Israel and the Middle East to play with and the different enemies and players of that game. And they've also looked to the heavens and they see this sort of cosmic threat and conclude, well, these are the end times. It's amazing to me that when they do polls of the public opinion, particularly in the United States, large percentages, way over half, will say that they think we're probably living in the end time and prophecies are being fulfilled. So this is not some backwater, insignificant idea in our culture, as crazy as it sounds, I think, to many educated people.